All right, friends. Good morning, Alliance. Good morning. We're going to get started, and I've been asked to lead us in song, and so I wonder if you would repeat these words after me. Come and go. I don't hear you. Come and go to that land. Come and go to that land. Come and go to that land where I'm bound. Will you stand and sing with me? My grandparents used to sing this song, and I thought they were singing about going to heaven. It wasn't until I was an adult that I realized they were singing about freedom, singing about their dreams for a place where we could truly realize beloved community. And there are many lands, including the lands that we've been learning about in this space today and will continue to learn about today, that pray for and struggle for a land where we all can be free. So let us sing that song together. As you hear me sing it, just join in as you catch the tune. Come and go to that land. Come and go to that land. Come and go to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go to that land. Come and go to that land. Come and go to that land where I'm bound. There is love in that land. There is love in that land. There is love in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There is love in that land. There is love in that land. There is love in that land where I'm bound. No more war in that land. Oh, no more war in that land. No more war in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. No more war in that land. Oh, no more war in that land. No more war in that land where I'm bound, 'cause I am a citizen in that land. I am a citizen in that land. I am a citizen in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. I'm a citizen in that land. Oh, I'm a citizen in that land. I'm a citizen in that land where I'm bound, and there is freedom in that land. There is freedom in that land. There is freedom in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There is freedom in that land. Oh, there is freedom in that land. There is freedom in that land where I'm bound. So don't you want to go to that land? Oh, don't you want to go to that land? Don't you want to go to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound? Don't you want to go to that land? Oh, don't you want to go to that land? So come and go to that land where I'm bound. Amen. Ashe.
Thanks to Michael Ray for that powerful song. Don't you want to go to that land? Oh. What an amazing weekend we have already had, and what an amazing weekend we will continue to have. As we heard from our panelists earlier this this morning, there is an invitation before us to decolonize. For the Alliance of Baptists is critically seated here, but connected to amazing work all around the world. And we're not the center of this work. We're a part of it. Perhaps our efforts should continue to accent that critical point that we're not the center, but we're a part of it. That the U.S. is not the center of the world, but a part of it. That Christians are not the center of the world, but a part of it. That white folk ain't the center of the world, but a part of it. In that spirit, I invite my brother Raimundo Barreto to bring greetings from another part of the world, our siblings from Brazil. Raimundo?
So good morning, everyone. And greetings on behalf of the Aliança de Batistas do Brasil and its president, Reverend Camila Oliver. Camila was supposed to be here. She is recovering from an illness, and due to other things that are happening right now in Brazil, they couldn't be here. I was asked to come, but I have been living for too long in the US, so my voice is kind of clouded. So I want you to hear their own voices through a letter that Camila sent to you to this gathering. So, dear Alliance friends, greetings to you with immense love and friendship. We hope these words reach your hearts with the same affection they come from ours. The Aliança de Batistas do Brasil praise God in gratitude for the ministry of faith and justice that is the Alliance of Baptists. We congratulate you on the pertinent choice of the theme for this year's gathering, Decolonizing the Great Commission. This is an important discussion right now, not just for churches in the US, but around the world. Dealing more specifically with the situation here in Brazil, this has been a recurring theme in our annual meetings, like the last two. In 2022, our theme was faith, diversity, and policies. We addressed the issue of faith vis-a-vis LGBTQ plus bodies in light of our country's public policies towards that community. In 2023, we gathered around the theme Faith, Democracy, and Rights in the city of Salvador, Bahia, in which we addressed the democratic state and the rule of law, an issue of extreme importance after the invasion of the Planalto Palace, the seat of our government, on January 8, 2023, in an attempt to coup against democracy. At the same meeting held in Salvador, the blackest city in our country, we addressed the issues linked to black feminist theology. At this year's meeting, to which all of you are invited to attend on October 18 through 20, 2024, in the city of Olinda, Pernambuco, we will discuss faith, health, and rights. Within this theme, we will discuss the themes related to mental health, and we will continue studying feminist theology with an emphasis on sexual and reproductive rights. You may be asking yourselves, why has the Aliança de Batistas do Brasil repeatedly brought themes related to political social rights into their churches and announced them outside the churches? Friends of the Alliance, we live to this day in our country with the lasting impact of the assaults on our rights carried out by the Bolsonaro administration from 2018 to 2022. This ruler came to power with the support of the most fundamentalist Christian churches and their pillars, the cult of ignorance, attack on science, dissemination of racism, violence against women, and LGBTQ phobia, and the murder of black, poor, and peripheral youth in large and medium-sized cities around the country. During this 2016 coup d'etat, orchestrated by those who opposed the popular gains, achieved with great effort by the social movements during the Workers' Party administrations, violent and misogynistic attacks were directed at President Dilma Rousseff for the simple fact that she was a woman, in fact, the first woman to be elected president in the country. Such acts culminated in the election of Jair Bolsonaro in 2018, a far-right candidate accelerating the process of necropolitics that threatened the rule of law and vulnerable populations, indigenous people, black Brazilians, women in general, the LGBTQIA+ people, social and community leaders, and the defenders of human rights in Brazil. In this terrible scenario, we faced the coronavirus pandemic, which revealed even more explicitly the inequality and inhumanity characteristic of the society in which we live. A society marked by religious intolerance, the ideological advancement of the theology of prosperity with the sense of individual and selfish accumulation, and the logic of oppression over significant portions of our population, proved to be insensitive to the piles of bodies that accumulated above all among the most impoverished populations in our countries. This escalation of inequity and inequality generated a political instance characterized by the culture of hate that circulates mainly through social media, which we call contagion networks, and fake news that fueled ignorance and became the base of support and main political survival strategy of the far-right government of the fascist agitator Jair Bolsonaro, who, even though no longer being office, left marks that are difficult to erase. And how has the Aliança de Batistas do Brasil responded to these events? Firm in the belief that the poor must never be forgotten, nor will the hope of those in need be frustrated, Psalm 9:18. We set out to act on faith as a common political practice. We organize ourselves to help the population in a concrete way. We coordinate distribution of food for those in need, and we are thankful, enormously grateful for the support the Alliance provided for us during that time. We welcome the sick and their families in word and action, and when the vaccine arrived, making it possible for us to take to the streets, we did so, joining the fight for social justice and political change in our countries. We, at the Aliança de Batistas do Brasil, during our 19 years of existence, have sought to propagate the faith that moves us to build a society in which all people can enjoy the life in abundance preached by Jesus the Nazarene, who is in his liberative, inclusive, and affirmative journey announced to us the good news of joy based on the reality of his time. This journey of liberation with the oppressed and excluded from Galilee it still drives our community today to also be resistant against any and all forms of oppression and injustice. We know that you, Alliance of Baptists, are also doing this. However, we take the opportunity to reinforce this call of faith because we believe that together we can build a better world, less unfair and less unequal. And they cite Matthew 25, I'll skip that. You know that, 35 to 40. So I hope you know. We know that you will also go through a decisive moment in the US elections. However, it's our role, with our recent experience, to remember you that this is not a time for discouragement. It's a time to be reborn in hope and gather strength, resisting even to the point of blood, Hebrews 12:4, against the sin of hunger, social injustice, racism, LGBTQIA+ phobia, feminicide, etc. We're just getting started. Let us cheer up. Let us cheer up for if we work and fight, it's because we have placed our hope in the living God. During the most critical moments here in Brazil, many of us in the Brazilian Alliance of Baptists have been persecuted. In a letter written to the Alliance of Baptists during the pandemic, we mentioned activist Camila Mantovani, who even had to leave Brazil. We also wrote to ask support for Pastor Odja Barros, who, when celebrating the wedding of two women, suffered death threats requiring police support and protection until very recent days. At the same time, Coletivo Vozes Maria, the Maria Voices, a member of the Aliança de Batistas do Brasil, led by the current Vice President Bárbara Aguiar, was also persecuted as it supported a group of more than 20 women victims of sexual abuse perpetrated by a pastor in the state of Pernambuco. This situation was turned into a documentary entitled Voices That Break Silence, available on YouTube. In addition, Pastor Camila Oliver, president of the Aliança, has been constantly attacked on her social networks and on Aliança's networks for the political position that the Aliança has advanced throughout this period, needing to be protected every time she travels around the country. However, even in the face of all this persecution, we, the Aliança de Batistas do Brasil, believe that it's the social function of the church, of the faith that moves us to build a dignified society without inequalities, which is why we will always be willing to express our position. Yes, we have a side, the side of life. This was the reason why, with two political projects only to choose from in 2022, one of them a project of death, a genocidal project that took more than 700,000 lives during the COVID pandemic, and starved a large part of the population to death. The Aliança de Batistas do Brasil took a direct stance advocating a vote for Lula to defeat the genocidal government. Yes, we know that due to the depth of the crisis we are experiencing, our work did not end at the election, and the threat to the working class generated by the deepening malices of capitalism was not magically dissipated at the elections. However, our most immediate fight was against a fascist government firmly allied with the bourgeoisie and its ceaseless attacks on the working class and the poor people. Our fight was against a government that placed 50 million workers in a situation of employment and more than 33 million in hunger cures, fighting to get cow bones and scraps of meat in landfills. We knew that this fight would not end with the counting of the ballots. However, the Aliança de Batistas do Brasil declared support for Lula as a gesture of faith. Now, they quote Hebrews 11:1. Yes, since the 2022 elections, our community has continued, as it has always done, the fight to break with this perverse economic and social model and all its oppressions. We are currently standing together with one of our member churches, Igreja Batista do Pinheiro, in the fight against the large energy and gas trading company Braskem, which is responsible for one of the major environmental and social crimes we have seen recently, resulted from the exploitation of rock salt by this mining corporation in the past 40 years in Maceió, Alagoas. The resistance and permanence of the Pinheiro Baptist Church in that neighborhood, one of the 5 neighborhoods affected by this crime, was guided by researchers, technicians, and the civil defense of Alagoas. Pinheiro's resistance in a territory in ruins is our permanent cry of prophetic denunciation of the largest social environmental crime on urban land in the world caused by Braskem and Maceió. Even at the beginning of this year, having been forced by local authorities to leave their headquarters, Igreja Batista do Pinheiro prophetically remains resisting, having rented a house from where they continue their denunciation of this major social and environmental crime that has uprooted thousands of families in the affected neighborhoods. Ultimately, Alliance friends, this is how we walk in prophetic faith, without discouragement, in the certainty that in large chorus of our prayer is stronger in unity and our action is more powerful. It is wonderful to be in unity of prayer and action with you. Therefore, I leave you with an excerpt of a song that we repeat around here. A new day will come, a new sky, a new earth, a new sea. And on that day, the oppressed, with one voice, freedom, they will sing. We are grateful for the partnership, solidarity, and welcome since our birth here in Brazil in 2005. And in prayer, we ask the divine Ruah to continue strengthening the work of the Alliance of Baptists and transforming the world into a community of good living, where love and peace reign, justice and full life, as preached by the Nazarene Christ. Affectionate hugs, Aliança de Batista do Brasil, April 9th, 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Raimundo, for those very kind words from our partners and our friends in Brazil, my dear friend and sister, Camila. And of course, I would be remiss to not further accent Camila's invitation to join them for the very good work that they are doing, and really the good work that they did, teaching us how to respond to a moment of political crisis. Even though Camila and the Alliance of Baptists of Brazil is very humble about this, their organizing efforts were instrumental in helping the new progressive president of Brazil, and I don't want us to sort of miss the power in that. Allison?
Is this your computer?
Yeah. You want to move it?
I can move it. I don't have, no, I don't want to lose it. Good, still morning? Good morning, Alliance. In California, it's always morning when I talk to y'all. It is my great privilege to introduce our next speaker, and because I was invited to do it, I'm going to take just a moment to do something else right before, which is, Carol, I don't know if you're able to come up, but we have Lisa and Elijah. If you would come up here, I want to take a moment on behalf of the Justice for Palestine and Israel community to recognize the one-year anniversary of the entire Alliance of Baptists passing a statement and making a pledge to work to be an apartheid-free faith community, to do everything we can It's an aspirational pledge. We are working, leaning into it, and we've committed to do what we can to work together with others around the world to end all ties with Israeli apartheid, settler colonization, and occupation. I have a certificate that simply says, Alliance of Baptists, in recognition of your commitment to oppose Israeli apartheid and work together to end all support to Israel's apartheid regime, settler colonialism, and military occupation. We deeply appreciate your partnership in this work. And you've lived this out in a variety of ways, and several Alliance communities, congregations are following in your footsteps, so I just want to call out briefly, and if you're a part of this community, you're welcome to stand. New Millennium Church of Arkansas, BPFNA, Bautistas por la Paz, Oakhurst Baptist Church in Atlanta, Ravensworth Baptist Church in Virginia, Wedgwood Community Church here in Charlotte, who signed the pledge as part of their Christmas Eve worship service. Talk about incarnation. And our latest pledges just this month, the Missions and Outreach Council of Poland Memorial Baptist Church in Raleigh, and Park Avenue Baptist Church in Atlanta. Thank you for your commitment to not only name Israeli apartheid, but to take action to end it. I know several Alliance congregations are in a discernment process, and sometimes this discernment takes months and even years, but being in this process, I am deeply grateful for. If you want to learn more about process in your congregation, please come to our workshop this afternoon. On Tuesday, I had the privilege of representing the Alliance, and Carol and Elijah, you don't quite know that I did this, but I was representing the Alliance with a group called Christians for a Free Palestine. And we met on Capitol Hill, and we had a worship service, and we went to block Congress from eating in the Senate cafeteria because Senate should not be eating while Gaza is starving. We knew we'd get arrested, and it was my first arrest as I engaged in civil disobedience. And one of the most memorable parts of the day, I didn't realize it was going to happen, but during our worship service and communion on the Capitol lawn before we did this, Reverend Raheb was able to be there and give us a blessing, and I was so grateful. I was so confident that I was doing the work of following Jesus in that moment with your blessing and your presence. Okay, now let me introduce Dr. Mitri Raheb. Dr. Raheb is one of the foremost Palestinian liberation theologians in the world. As I was thinking about this, I was debating whether I could say arguably the most powerful liberation theologian in the world until I went back about two millennia and thought, no, there was one that I dare say was maybe a little more foremost, but Dr. Raheb is indeed a follower, a deeply committed follower of the foremost Palestinian theologian in the world. He's been a longtime pastor of Christmas Lutheran Church, 30 years. He's a prolific writer and teacher, author of over 50 books. And Faith in the Face of Empire is one of his most well-known, and what a profound way of understanding not only empire as it manifests in Palestine, but indeed as it manifests in the world, especially through the United States government, and what that means as followers of Jesus within that context. And I want to also highlight his newest book, Decolonizing Palestine, the Land, the People, and the Bible. If you want to realize ways in which the liberal church who has learned from the best Western theologians, how the liberal Christian church has been colonized and continues to live out its colonization in a way that deeply harms, indeed in a way that is deeply connected to the genocide that is being enacted in this moment. I encourage you to read his book and learn from it, feel humbled, and find ways to continue to grow and change. Dr. Raheb is the founder and president of Dar el-Khelima University, the only university of arts and culture in Palestine, and a founding member of Alliance partner Bright Stars of Bethlehem. Dr. Raheb is a significant partner of the Alliance, one who, in the words of our preacher yesterday, I have been able to learn from and expand my understanding of God from, and one who I'm confident we today will learn from, and if we allow him, expand our knowledge of God. I invite up to the stage, you're on the stage, I invite up to the lectern Dr. Mitri Raheb.
Thank you, Alison, for this introduction, and especially for all the great work that you are doing with your colleagues. This is a blessing to us, and really, we appreciate that very much. Thank you, Elijah, for your invitation, and it is an honor and a privilege to be with you this morning and to talk about decolonizing the Great Commission, a word from Palestine. And I especially really appreciate your invitation to speak to you at this gathering while our people in Gaza are facing a genocide. So thank you for highlighting the struggle of our people. And what a crucial and timely topic you chose for this year. But I was not surprised, because the Alliance of Baptists have been always on the forefront of doing things. What you are doing in the work is really amazing. And I wish that many churches in the US will follow suit with you. Elijah dealt yesterday with the theory of decolonization, so you made my job much easier today. Thank you. I would like to focus my presentation today in 4 parts. I will first start with decolonizing history, because I'm a historian originally. And then I will talk about a certain aspect of colonization or of colonialism, which is settler colonialism, as it relates to Palestine. And then in the third part, I will talk about decolonizing the reality, because unfortunately, here in the States, you don't get in the news the full picture. So I need just to talk about that. And then I will talk about decolonizing theology. So I hope you will bear with me these 4 points. So let's start with decolonizing history. I always like to start reminding people that the first missionaries did not come out of the Midwest. Just that we make sure that we are on the same page, right? And the Bible did not originate in the Bible Belt. Thanks God, right? I mean, imagine, huh? So the first missionaries actually came out of Palestine, and they were powerless. They were persecuted. They didn't have the empire with all their power behind them, and they went out to proclaim a crucified as their Lord. Not Caesar, but a crucified, a rebellious freedom fighter as their Lord. And we need to remember that the Christians in the Middle East, and there are around maybe 15 million of them, are not the outcome of Western mission. Because often, when we get groups from the US, often they ask us all the time, tell us, when did you convert to Christianity? Assuming that maybe we used to be heathens or Muslims who were converted by some Southern Baptist missionaries or something. And I always like to remind them that, it all started there, right? This is why, actually, when I read the subtitle of my speech today, A Word of Palestine, I wasn't sure if you talk about Palestine the 1st century or Palestine the 21st century. And as Arab Christians, we are older than Islam. So Arab Christianity was there before Islam. Many people don't know that. And this is why, actually, the Arabic language was one of the languages where the gospel was preached in some years ago, right? When you read the story of Acts chapter 2, when the Holy Spirit came on the disciples and they started speaking in tongues, right? They spoke in Danish, Finnish, German, Swedish, right? At least as Lutherans, we like to think so, but actually Arabic is one of the languages mentioned there in that passage. And when we think of mission, I always hear it even from professors that the 19th century was the mission century par excellence. I need to disappoint you, it was not. Actually, this is a Eurocentric colonial vision of mission. You know which was the greatest mission church in history? It was a Middle Eastern church. It was the Church of the Nestorians, based in Persia. Already in the 6th century, they brought the gospel through the Silk Road all the way to China. So there was a church in China before there was a church in North Europe or in Eastern Europe. People don't know that history. They think it's Hudson Taylor who brought the gospel to China, Eurocentric, colonial view of history. Unfortunately, this church, the Nestorian church, was declared heretics by the Christian empire. And the churches of the Middle East were not the outcome of an imperial conquest, but actually developed organically, where the gospel of Jesus Christ interacted with the native culture. This is why we never had in our region a one church, like a one Catholic church like in Europe. We had so many churches, Coptic church, Aramaic church, Armenian church, etc., because everywhere the gospel went, interacted and embraced the local culture. It's exactly opposite what happened with Western mission, where when the missionary went, they destroyed the local culture. And I think we heard it today from our sister from Mexico. And this is why Christianity was always pluralistic in our region. And now I have again to disappoint you a bit, because the term Great Commission is also a colonial term. The Bible speaks about a great commandment, the greatest commandment, right? Nowhere of a great commission. You don't find that in the Bible. In fact, that term was first used in the 17th century and became popular only in the 19th century by Hudson Taylor in connection to his China mission. So the great commandment of love was colonized to mean conquest and conversion. And the witness to the crucified was colonized to become a military crusade. And the power of love was replaced by the love of power. Today we know, and we heard it yesterday from Elijah, that the idea of a Great Commission thus cannot be separated from European colonialism, where conquest and Christianity and commerce, as we heard it yesterday, went hand in hand, resulting in culturicide, which is cultural genocide basically, exploitation and death. Today, that kind of European colonialism is disguised under prosperity gospel. The 19th century, which saw a large mission expansion, was the century of colonialism and nationalism. We heard it yesterday again from Elijah. And at the intersection of colonialism and nationalism, a kind of a hybrid form, is Zionism. Zionism is the hybrid form of colonialism and nationalism. Or if you want, is a sub-branch of Eurocentric Christian colonialism. And so Zionism is thus, in essence, the last version of Eurocentric settler colonialism. And this brings me to the second part to talk about settler colonialism. Because, when you think of Palestine, when you hear in the news about Palestine, people use the word often conflict. But what we are experiencing is not a conflict, because a conflict implies you have two groups, they are fighting about something. This is not our situation. Or sometimes people think it's a war between Islam and Judaism. It's not. Or in the news here all the time, Israel war against Hamas. It's not. Because it's the war against all people, all of our people. And one word which I really hate is the word complicated. When they talk about the situation in Palestine being complicated. Because they really don't want to solve it. They want to blur the situation. I never ever heard the word complicated when it comes to Ukraine. Right? It's crystal clear, a land occupied by another. Very clear. When it comes to Palestine, they start talking about complicated. No, it's not complicated. It's crystal clear. It's not conflict. It's a settler colonialism. And this is why settler colonialism is different than colonialism or neocolonialism. And bear with me to share with you what is the difference. The main feature that distinguishes settler colonialism from, say, classical colonialism is the fact that settlers go to another country to settle in and occupy it permanently. The emphasis on permanently. And they exercise state sovereignty, judicial control over the indigenous land, with the ultimate aim to replace the native people. Not to live with the native people, but to replace them slowly but surely. This is the situation in Palestine, and I will come back to that soon. In that context of settler colonialism, the native people, they become aliens at home. And the settlers, they become like the natives. This is what we have in Palestine. I have an old American woman that visited us one day, and we took her around, she saw everything, and then I think she wanted somehow to comfort me, and she said, Pastor, I really don't understand why Israel is doing that, because God told them to be nice to the strangers. I said, who's the stranger? I'm ready to be nice to them, but I'm not the stranger, right? But this is what happens in settler colonialism. The native people, they are depicted as the aliens. And the indigenous land is described as terra nullius, empty, barren land. I think you know it from here. We heard it yesterday with the doctrine of discovery. And it is just waiting there to be discovered, to become the private property of the settlers. That's the whole thing, private property. This is what we have in Palestine. 19th century, they said a land without a people for a people without a land, which is a myth, right? The land was never without a people. The Palestinian people have been occupying Palestine for millennia. And the people, the Jewish people in Europe, were not without land. They were Europeans. But the Europeans didn't want them there, so they sent them to Palestine. And the native people in settler colonialism are depicted with racist construct as savage, right? Violent, backwards, terrorists, while the settlers are portrayed as the civilized and brave pioneers. I mean, think how many times you heard the word Palestinian with some of these terrorists or whatever. So settler colonialism is always about occupying the geography, the land, while actually eliminating the demography, the native demography. It's all about geography and demography all the time. So settler colonialism, they take the land, but they push the native people out. If not out, then in Bantustans in South Africa or in native reservation in North America, right? It's all about geography and demography. And to defend the settler property from the savage, a police state is created and is granted extraordinary power over the native people, including power over their civil affairs. This is exactly the situation in Palestine. The Israeli control every aspect of our life, every aspect. Even our water resources, how much water we get per day, is defined by the State of Israel. So, and this is important, settler colonialism is always maintained by the hard power, but also by a soft power. Always hardware, and always there is software. You know, hardware, in case of Israel, are all the toys that Israel gets for free from the United States, right? $3.8 billion in aid. That amount equals the amount given to the rest of the world in aid, imagine. Mainly in military equipment, hardware. But you know what is more difficult than the hardware is the software. And the software is provided by Christian seminaries, by churches, who often think that the Israelites of the Bible are the same like the state of Israel of today. And then we become the bad guys. And so the state of Israel is the last Eurocentric settler colonial project. It's the last one. If you think settler colonialism is over, it's not. Originally an imperial settler colonial project that was instrumentalized Jews as subcontractors for settler colonial British Empire. Today it's an imperial American project, what sustains Israel. And you have many Christians in this country, not Alliance of Baptists, thanks God, who provide Israel, continue to provide Israel with the software. I talk about Christian Zionism. So let me come to the third part to talk about decolonizing the reality. So if you want to envision what's happening in Palestine, Palestine today, if you look at the West Bank especially, looks very much like a piece of a Swiss cheese. You know the Swiss cheese? Where Israel gets the cheese, that's the land, and the Palestinians, we are pushed in the holes. So Bethlehem, where I live, is one of these holes, surrounded by 22 Jewish settlements all around. They have taken 86% of our own land. And this is West Bank. I'm not talking about Israel, right? This is exactly, Bethlehem has become like, if you want, a native reservations. And settlers, in fact, on daily basis this week, they have taken another big chunk of land from Palestinians. Just, they take it by force. That is settler colonialism. Think of Gaza. We are in the 7th month of this genocide with 33,000 people killed, murdered. You know, often here they say died. Died what? By heart attack or? No, they were murdered by Israeli airstrike. 75,000 people were injured. 13,000 are missing. And when I say these words, you know, we have a campus in Gaza. That campus was destroyed on Holy Week, just 2 weeks ago. Totally destroyed. Together with the 11 other universities in Gaza, fully destroyed. This is not a war against Hamas. This is the war against our own people. Out of the 33,000 who were killed, many of our artists there in Gaza were murdered. 2 of them were murdered with their families, including the kids, the husbands, some of the brightest and most creative people in Gaza. Among the missing, we have one student, a great photographer. He's missing since the 2nd week of October. We don't know if the Israeli took him, jailed him, or if they killed him and buried him. We have no idea where he is. 70% of those murdered and injured are children and women. We don't hear about them a lot. 100 journalists were murdered on purpose because Israel didn't want the word to come out. They didn't want people on the ground to capture and to tell the world what's happening there. Imagine 100 journalists in 6 months. 65% of the building in Gaza totally destroyed, including our own building, as I said. 70% of the people starving. This is according to American, not mine and not Hamas. 80% of the schools are demolished, and 90% of the hospitals. So why do you do that if you are fighting Hamas? They are not fighting Hamas. This is again the settler colonial project in action, because they want to make life in Gaza unbearable, unlivable, impossible, so that the people will leave. Again, think about demography and geography. So when the people leave, Israel will take over the geography. And this is why we need really to remember that what's happening in Gaza did not start on October 7th. Right? It started over 100 years ago with a British lord called Balfour. He was the lord to actually give Palestine to the European Zionists. This is why I always like to remind people, it was not the Lord God who promised Israel the land, it was Lord Balfour. And there is a big difference between the Lord God and the Lord Balfour. Thanks God. There is a difference between God and the empire. So over the last 100 years, Israel was trying hard, slowly but surely, to settle Palestinian land, all of historic Palestine. You know, in settler colonialism, what happened to North America and to Africa, when you colonized land, you change the name, right? You know that there was a different name for North America. And so this is exactly what Israel is doing. They changed it from Palestine to Israel. Same thing. In 1948, they took 77% of historic Palestine. We thought this will be enough. The Palestinians say, okay, you take it and leave the 23% for us. But no, Israel wants the whole cake for themselves. And right now, actually, they occupy 50% of the West Bank with military power. And they have Jewish settlers there who continue every day to terrorize us. But now, even Gaza, this small piece of land, they didn't like the Palestinians even to be there. So now they want to kick them out because there is lots of gas on the shores of Gaza. And they want as one settler said it a month ago, you know, we want these white sandy beaches of Gaza. So for the last 100 years, Israel has been pumping in settlers from everywhere in the world, even if they are not Jewish, they make them Jewish, and pumping out Palestinians, pumping in, pumping out. But this project is failing, did not work. The Palestinians, 1967, they did not run away. In Gaza right now, they refuse to go out of Gaza with all the difficulties they are facing. So, like the Europeans who were trying hard to Christianize the land they took, Israel is busy Judaizing the land. And you see it every day. It's happening in Jerusalem, it's happening in the West Bank, and they now want to do it in Gaza. But in order to do this, they need to demonize the native people. And right now, Hamas becomes like the demon. Because people here are afraid they have Islamophobia, and Islamophobia is instrumentalized. So you do not see human anymore. You don't see the children, the women. You see, and you don't see even Hamas. It's just a name that is thrown there. And like in all settler colonial project, there is a software at work. And you know what is the blueprint for settler colonialism? It's the book of Joshua. The book of Joshua actually is the blueprint of settler colonialism. God himself is telling the Israelites, go into the land, kill everyone. And when some people refused to kill, they were punished by God by not finishing the job. That's the book of Joshua. Did you read it? So no wonder that the founder of the State of Israel, and the first president, Ben-Gurion, 1958, when Israel celebrated its 10th anniversary, Ben-Gurion started what? A Bible study group at his home. And what was the book they were reading? The book of Joshua. On October 27th, when Netanyahu ordered the Israeli military to enter into Gaza, and Netanyahu had a press conference, what did he quote? A version of Joshua found in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 3, where God is telling, go and finish Amalek. Old, young, men, women, sheep, ox, everything. That is what we find in the Bible. That is the warrior God. God the warrior. And, you know, when we read the Bible, I always say the Bible is very much like if some of you were in Jerusalem and you went to the Old City, there is the bazaar. In the Bible, you find everything. So if you would like to find texts that talk about colonization, it's sure there. You go to the book of Joshua. And if you want texts that talk about justice, you go to the prophets, right? To Jesus. What you find in the Bible does not say so much about the Bible, but about you. You find in the Bible what you are looking for. And so the empire was happy with the book of Joshua. They found exactly what they needed to colonize 2/3 of the world. They didn't listen to the prophets. They didn't listen to Jesus. They listened to Joshua. Joshua was exactly like Ben-Gurion, their master. And so let me come to the last part, which is decolonize theology. So Jesus, when they talk about the Great Commission, they usually talk about Matthew, right? 28. But there is also this other text where Jesus is saying, you will be my witnesses. You know that in Judea, in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, until the end of the world. And I think this is really, I would like to focus on this verse. Be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria. This is why I think what's happening in Gaza today is so important. Why is it important? Because it helps us see settler colonialism as is. Gaza, what's happening in Gaza is becoming like a magnifying glass. You look there and you see things that you never saw before. And so settler colonialism is not history. It is something happening now in the 21st century. And this is why Gaza helps us to understand what happened to Christianity in the last 500 years, but also what's happening to Judaism today. It opens our eyes to the reality of this world, but also to the reality of our countries and of our church, unfortunately. So you will be my witnesses. So what are we witnessing today? We are witnessing settler colonialism. We heard it from Allison, apartheid, or genocide, as the International Court of Justice put it. But you know, there is no other genocide in the world that was covered 24/7, non-stop. And yet, the world seems to be blind, numb. So our call today is to be witnesses to what's happening in Gaza, to speak up, to keep talking about Palestine. We cannot preach a crucified Lord and keep silence when people are being crucified. And you know, the sad thing is that they are trying to silence us everywhere. They don't want us to witness. You know, when the president of Harvard opposed to kick out the Palestinian students, to silence them, she had to resign. President of University of Pennsylvania, same thing. Colombia, where I was 2 days ago, Palestinians for Justice in Palestine were outlawed. So they don't want us to witness, because the empire doesn't want the settler colonial project to end. This week in Germany, in Berlin, they had a conference on Palestine. You know, Germans love debates, so why not debating Palestine? The keynote speaker was prevented from entering Germany. The police took him and jailed him. Very respected doctor. And when the people met in the building to talk, the government turned the electricity off. They don't want any witnesses. They want the settler colonial genocide to continue without witnesses. So we have to deplore the idea about the warrior God. I think for too long, Christians were worshiping this warrior God that we hear about in the Old Testament. And sometimes, I hear many of these words that talk about, the warrior God. And today, it's not by chance that we live in a world where the warrior God is very strong with the militarization. Never ever in history are countries spending so much on military expenses like in this decade. That is the warrior God, the power of death, the state terror. And the warrior God wants to continue settle the promised land. And this is why we keep talking about a just war. All the time when you hear about Gaza, you hear the just war theory. Israel has to defend itself. I have no problem with Israel defending itself from the people that they occupy. Have you heard about that? I mean, it's usually the occupied they need to defend themselves. But in settler colonialism, no, it's the settler they need to defend themselves from the savage. That's the just war theory. It's a Christian theory.
Well,
we forgot all about prophetic theology. And we have to continue to decolonize the idea of a white God. One of my friends just published 2 weeks ago a book called How God Became White. I'm not sure if any of you came and visited us in Bethlehem when I was pastor at Christmas Lutheran Church. We have beautiful stained glass windows from the 19th century, as beautiful as this one. This is in Bethlehem, this is in Palestine, and when you look at them, you think Jesus was Scandinavian, with his blue eyes and blonde hair. But this was 19th century settler colonial Christianity. We forgot actually that Jesus was not a European. When I go to Japan, they always think Jesus was European. And I like always to remind them, Jesus was an Asian. They say Asian? Yeah, Palestine is West Asia. That brown Palestinian Jewish Jesus has nothing to do with the white God. And the idea of the chosen people, unfortunately, became a form of religious nationalism, exceptionalism. Today, we need to decolonize theology because the majority of the Christians do not live in the northern hemisphere. They live in the global south. This is why 2/3 of the Christians today are found. And this is why we need to listen to them, hear their witness. This is why it was so important this morning to hear from our friends from Mexico, from Cuba, from Brazil, from the global south. And I love the other subtitle you put for this meeting, which talks about partnership. Because we need to be humble and to do mission today in partnership with people in the Global South. And we need to rediscover the scripture as a literature of resistance to the empire. This is why Jesus came to proclaim not the empire, but the reign of God, an antithesis to the empire. What Gaza did through this magnifying glass is that people, especially young people, are starting to see what's going on not only in Gaza, but in the whole world. But Gaza opens the door for people to see what's happening in the world. And this is why people are going to the streets, the young people. Politicians are still siding with settler colonialism, but the people on the streets are becoming our witness. This is why, as Palestinians, I always like to remind our people, we need to celebrate our resilience. Imagine for the last 100 years, the empire has been waging a war against us Palestinians, and we still stand tall. For the last 400 years, settler colonialism, wanted to get rid of the African American, and they still stand tall today. This is something we need to celebrate. Russia, after 2 years facing the Western world, they are becoming weak. Okay, right now they are not that weak, but it's tough time for them after 2 years. And they are an empire, or a former empire. Imagine the small Palestinian people of 6, 7 million, 10, 11 million worldwide. After 100 years of war against us, we still stand tall in Palestine. Yes, sometimes we feel that we have this, this big stone, and we are in this long Saturday, 100 years Saturday, not 3 days, 100 years. And we keep saying, "Oh Lord, how long, oh Lord?" But we never give up that Sunday is coming, that Palestine will be free. And the angels will not do that. We have to do it. And this is why what Alison talked about, what churches can do, is very important. The angels, you are the angels that has to do the job. And the last point I would like to end with, we cannot decolonize theology without reparations. The only people who got reparations were the Jewish people, because the empire was taking money from one pocket and put it in the other pocket. What about reparations for the Native Americans, for the African Americans, for the Palestinians? Without reparation, dear friends, we will not be able to end this settler colonial project. And so today, when we think of the Great Commission, we need to decolonize our thinking, because I think we have been too much influenced by the empire. Even myself, when I studied in Germany, I became so influenced by the empire. I thought, Germans were doing theology, the real thing. while people, in subtropical countries, they do contextual theology. As if there is anything like contextual theology. Everything is contextual theology. The difference is only between those that they already know what they are doing is contextual and those who don't know yet. But we pray for them that someday they will know. And see, decolonizing theology is really at the heart of what we are doing. But this is, I tell you, it's a fun project. Yes, we are facing immense challenges from settler colonialism, but also this contextual theology, this decolonial theology gives us so much power to continue our struggle, not to be silenced, but to be witnesses for the resurrected, crucified Lord in Jerusalem, in Palestine today, in Bethlehem, and until the end of the world here in Charlotte. Thank you very much.
The prophets of old would begin their remarks with, "Thus saith the Lord." And we got a prophet anew in our midst. Can you join me in thanking I know we need to lunch, so we'll get there. But Mitri has traveled from Bethlehem. And I think about that song that I like to sing around Christmas, "Oh, little town of Bethlehem." And Mitri, in the book, Palestine, the land, the people, the Bible, you start off by saying that to many Christians, Palestine is a theoretical place. But to Palestinians, it's a real place. And in many ways, that disconnect, dissonance, sort of bookends a lot of this conversation. I want to just maybe give you some space to say more about what you think the impact of that dissonance is between, for those of us in which Palestine is sometimes a theoretical place, but for the experience of Palestinians who are living on a very real land, in a very real place. I want to start there.
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, I think for most of the Christians who come to visit Palestine, they come to visit an imagined land. As children, we think about, the Magi and the shepherds, and we go to Palestine, we think, the shepherds are still there. A friend of mine, a professor from the Midwest, I wanted to write a book with him on Jerusalem, and I noticed all the time he was interested in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus, while I was interested in Jerusalem of today. And this is why I always say tourists who come to Palestine, they come to run where Jesus walked. And they go from one archaeological site to the other, from one ancient shrine to the other, looking for the living among the dead. And I always like to tell them, he's not there. He is risen. Which means he is to be found among his people. Among us here today. And so this is where we find him.
Thank you for that remark, Mitri. I want to ask two more questions and then open it up to some of our folks here. And for the second question, I want to go in a little bit of a different direction. You were talking about, one of the impacts of colonization is that it can colonize the minds of even the people who want to do the right thing, right? And so I'm thinking about when I first heard about what happened on October 7th, given my own context of living in the United States, of reading U.S. news, of being in relationship with some folk in Israel, right? I was influenced by that, right? And it was only for me when I started talking to my black colleagues, some who had been to Palestine, but some who had not, consistently black folk that I trusted, right, were saying, this is settler colonialism. We have to go back 50 years, 100 years. What I'm wondering is, for those people who it's taking time to understand that, oh, this is more intense. And perhaps there's a little bit of even guilt that it's taken this much time. Is it too late for those people to join the Palestinian struggle?
It's never too late, believe me, even, that man on the cross was never too late, right? But let me put it this way. Before starting to come to the United States, I always wonder why Americans don't know much about what's happening. But the more I started coming here, it took me also a while to understand, if you just listen to the news, forget about Fox News. Even if you listen to other news, you don't get the reality. Because here, even news, it's about entertainment. International news is 1 minute, 16 seconds. A friend did her PhD on that. Out of 1 hour, 1 minute, 16 seconds. So what do you cover? Mexico, Brazil, Palestine. This is one. But secondly, when it comes to Palestine, and there is a very interesting study that was done on CNN, how CNN, which is not Fox News, but still, how they covered the Gaza war, and they found out, very interesting, they were told, the journalists, exact instructions what to see and what not to see, what to show and what not to show. You always show the Jewish mother of the hostage, so you personalize with her story. Palestinians, you don't hear their personal stories. They are numbers. And then you see Hamas, and then you think, oh, they are coming here to occupy the US or something. So the news here, if you believe in free media, forget that. It might be free on everything except on Palestine. And this exception is, as I said, how come that you cannot debate Palestinian issue in the most important universities in this country?
Have you heard of anything that people cannot debate about? Debate, for God's sake. So this is why, when it comes to Palestine, unfortunately, the empire doesn't want you to know the truth. The Israel lobby is there to attack everyone who try to be witness. You know? They try to do character assassination. Even if somebody like, Professor Gay from Harvard, she wasn't pro-Palestinian. She just said, I cannot prohibit students from telling their story. That was enough. Why? Because the donors in Harvard, they don't like that. And this is just one example. I can tell you about maybe 50 universities in this country that are silencing our story. So if you don't hear it in the university, if you don't hear it in the media, where do you hear it? You have to go to alternative media, but you have to be proactive to find the truth, you know? But remember what Jesus said, you will find the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Thank you for that response, this entire talk. Mitri, on my last question, and then I'll have Brett help me open it up if there are questions from the floor. You know, is in such a short time period, 6 months or so, more than 33,000 people killed, murdered. 70% of which you said are women and children. Universities like your own destroyed. Cultural centers. And just people's day-to-day lives. In that context of violence, of empire, of colonization, of settler colonialism, and of suffering, the question, maybe it's too modest, but the question that's been sitting with me for months now is, for people who genuinely do care and are disturbed by that, how do we be witnesses? Especially in this imperial context.
Yeah, it's different. It's difficult for me to see how, but I can tell you, when Alison mentioned that Holy Communion service we did at the Lane of Congress, and I saw all of these young pastors and young Christians, a few Jewish rabbis, all actually demonstrating for a free Palestine. And I see this everywhere I go. I see there is an awakening in this. Maybe this is the third awakening. You know, the second awakening was with the mission. Thanks God that is over. But maybe the third awakening is a real awakening. The young people today in this country are really passionate about justice.
Amen.
And I think we really need to celebrate their courage. I mean, to go there in the Senate and to be put into jail is not something that people will do, you know, just like that. I mean, that need courage, and that courage really need to be celebrated. So Alison and all your friends and team, all the churches here, free of apartheid, Thank you, because you are doing the work of witnesses. You are our witnesses here.
Amen. Thank you, Mitri. Let's open it up to questions that you all have. Also, can I get some help for Brett, since I know Brett's going to be running around? So let's take at least 3 questions right now, back to back, and then Mitri will write them down. So is there, I think there's another microphone right there. Carol, there's a microphone right there. So y'all can, yeah. So let's take 3 questions or so right now, back to back, and then Mitri will try to answer them. I know we have a lot of thoughts on this. If we can, do our best to keep it to a question that Mitri can answer. Mitri is around, so he'll be happy to discuss with folk later, but please keep it to a question.
An easy question, please. Easy question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your courage and ongoing witness, and for being with us this morning. I just wanted to read a real brief excerpt from your Faith in the Face of Empire, and just ask you a quick question about it. So in that book you write, resistance is a right, its framework having been established in the mid-20th century by international law. The 20th century experienced 2 liberation movements that made nonviolent resistance a success: Gandhi's leadership in India against the British Empire, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s fight in the United States against racial discrimination and segregation. Both these movements managed to mobilize people to organize popular movements for their own liberation. Their success relied on recognizing the dangers in resorting to violence. They understood that violence is a culture unto itself. It is not something one does like a hat when dealing with the enemy and then sets aside at the end of the confrontation. Once violence enters the arena, it creates a culture that is very difficult to eradicate. In fact, liberation in the true sense also means liberating the enemy from its own violence. This is why nonviolence is often one of the most powerful tools in any resistance movement. My question is, this was written 10 years ago. Do you still hold to that? And even if so, are there certain instances where violent resistance is requisite? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, you know what you wrote, and so do you still hold to this? Next question, yes, and then let's take one more after that.
Hi, thank you so much for being here with us, and really appreciate your contributions today. This has been I'm at Wake Divinity, and so as seminary students, this has been a conversation that has been happening every week at lunch of what's happening in Palestine, and historically as well as currently. And one of the things that we have been in conversation about, and I'm curious from your perspective and understanding, in our context of the churches that we're serving at and in our greater community, and particularly interfaith spaces, the conflation that is happening in person, but also in the media, social media, between conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And as Christians, responding and interacting with that, of educating, but also just as I, as a white person, am not going, if someone feels, I'm encountering a black person whose their personal lived experience is saying that is racist, I'm not gonna go in and counter and say, as a white person, no, that's not racist in that conversation, because it's not my place that's not my lived experience. But we've been wrestling with this conversation of how do we encounter that when I know that being pro-Palestine and anti-Zionist is not anti-Semitic. They're 2 distinct things, but engaging in those conversations, what do you have to say around that?
And then we'll take one more question.
Thank you very much for sharing with us, and your distinction between soft power and hard power, military power, is prophetic. And the soft power, which is controlling the U.S. In your book, you talk about Zionism and evangelicals, and about don't listen to what they say they're about, but look at what they're doing. Same with the ADL, and how anybody who criticizes anything about Israel immediately goes on their chart as a terrorist organization, and another incident of anti-Semitic hate. So can you comment and elaborate upon what you wrote in your book and about how, following up the other question about this whole concept of anti-Semitic and anti-Zionism being conflated, and what we can do to articulate within our circles?
Thank you. So I don't know what order you want to take those three questions.
Thank you. Yeah, let me start with the first question. I think also in the book there I talk about creative resistance, which I like more than nonviolent resistance, because nonviolent is you are negating something negative, thinking that negating the negative is something positive. So creative resistance as a president of a university focusing on arts, culture, and design, for me that is maybe the way to go. Now, according to international law, occupied people are allowed to use even armed resistance, according to international law. And I think I write that also in one sentence there. But for me, it's important. One thing is important. We usually call the freedom fighter terrorists, but we don't call the settler colonial country state terrorist. We need to talk more about state terrorists. You know, just to tell you a story, I have a minute for a story. Yes. I like to tell story because people, I had somebody from the States coming. He told me, you know, he has a good amount of money to give to us. I said, nice. What for? He said, I would like you to do non-violent training for the people in Palestine. I said, sounds good, but I have a better idea for you. He said, what? I said, why didn't you go to one of the Jewish organizations, tell them, I have money to give for you to train Israeli soldiers on nonviolence. So it's the occupied that are called violence, and the occupier are called civilized. I mean, how many times did you hear, and this is to your first question, yes. How many times in the news did you hear the word barbaric regarding October 7th, but you never heard this word in connection of killing 33,000 people? That is not barbaric. That is self-defense. Come on. Right? So, yeah, so I think that's for the first question. The second question, we need to know that anti-Semitism is being weaponized to silence the witness of people. So when I say you are my witness, when Jesus say you will be my witnesses, he's saying, you know, do not be afraid. When they call you, remember in Matthew 5, blessed if they persecute you and talk all bad things about you, lying, right? Weaponizing. That's what Jesus was talking about. And anti-Semitism is one thing that is being. But what is also important, and this is why I mentioned, like when we had this service at the Lane of Congress, we had Jewish rabbis with us. And the Jewish rabbis who witness for Palestine, they are not called anti-Semite, they call them self-hating Jews to silence them, like they are crazy. But, you know, in the Bible, prophets, unfortunately, were always persecuted. And people at that time, they never know that they are prophets. Later, they knew they were right. And so, because anti-Semitism means demonizing a whole people, the Jewish people. We cannot, as Christians, demonize Jews or Muslims, indigenous, because that's part of settler colonialism. No, we appreciate Judaism, and Judaism has been always part of Palestine. Palestinian Jews were always part of Palestine as occupied people. But when these European settlers came as British subcontractors to exploit our land and to bring death to our people, this is Zionism that we need to resist. Christian Zionism, I say, and I have a whole chapter on Christian Zionism in my book. By the way, since we are in the States and commercial are allowed everywhere, okay, let me have a commercial break, okay, commercial break. I was waiting for my book to come. It arrived already 2 weeks here in Charlotte, but we are trying to get it out from Covenant Presbyterian Church. It might be on the way.
I think it's here.
It's here? Okay, so I will be ready to sign the book. I have, I think, like 60 copies that I brought. Yeah, what I say there in the book is, people can believe many things. We cannot control what people believe. But we should be able to control what they do out of that belief. So you love Israel, fine. I have no problem with that. God bless you. But if that means supporting a settlement on Bethlehem land, no, I will not allow that. That your belief will cause harm to me. Because for me, it is important not to harm anyone. And so once a theology starts harming people, it's ends to become a theology and starts to become ideology. And Christian Zionism actually is not a theology. It's an ideology that supports Zionist settler colonialism in Palestine. And by the way, these Christian Zionists that you think love Israel, they are the real anti-Semite. You know why? Because they want to bring all the Jews to Palestine so that 2/3 of them will be killed and the last third will convert to Christianity. So they are calling for the annihilation of the Jewish people. That's anti-Semitism. But you know what? Netanyahu has no problem to share bed with them because as long as they fulfill his selfish desires with money. So that is real anti-Semitism that we need to resist. And so, in the book I talk about that.
I think we have time for one more question. Should we get one for we haven't got anything from this side. So let's take one from here. So Brett, you can take that question, and then Carol will take one more, and then we'll try to wrap up by 12:45 from this side. We've been preferential to my right, so let's do one from this side. All right, yeah. So over here.
Father Mitri, in your book, in Decolonizing Palestine, one of the software that you mentioned is scientific racism, something that is immediately would strike a chord with African Americans here, scientific racism, eugenics. We're in North Carolina, a state with a horrible history of the sterilization of people of color. And so I'm wanting you to elaborate maybe specifically how has scientific racism affected Palestinians?
Very good, thank you. And then,
just in everyday conversation with your fellow church members, your friends, people you're talking to through politics and what have you. How do you explain to people that Hamas does not represent all Palestinians, and beyond that, that Netanyahu doesn't represent all Israelis, and that to be against Netanyahu is not being anti-Semitic?
Thank you. Thank you. Very good. So let's end with those two questions.
You know, 100 years ago when the empire started the war against us, Hamas was not there. Hamas is a new phenomenon, and still the war has been going on against us for the last 100 years. And actually, and we learned that from first century Palestine. It was actually the brutality of the empire that created Jewish Hamas. They call them the zealots in the Bible. The empire keep creating these groups because, you know, if you cannot reach freedom with peaceful metal, then you think, you know, we have to resort to all different kinds of ways. So it's really the empire that triggered all these groups. You can read more about that also in my other book, Faith in the Face of Empire. And the last question, scientific racism, yeah, that's part of the software. And I think as African American, you know how supposedly scientific where in 19th century, again, that's part of settler colonialism, how the world or peoples were put into 4 categories. And some are superiors, others are inferior. And definitely this kind plays a role. Why? Because this so-called scientific racism was weaponized against us Palestinians in 2 ways. First, they said Palestinians are cursed in the Bible. They belonged to Ham, and Ham was cursed. And in the scientific, they use this biblical language. And the other way, because we are Arabs. You know, Hitler, the Jews were not on the bottom of his hierarchy, because Arabs were even worse than Jews. And so you have this what we call what Edward Said called Orientalism. When the West look at the Arab world as an inferior feminine that is just waiting there to be controlled, occupied by the male Western world. So, yeah, and today it's Islamophobia is part of that, because they think the majority, I mean, most of the people think all Palestinians are Muslims. And so as Muslims, you have this racism also against them. And so when I say we have to fight anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, all form of racism, because all of that are just tools for settler colonialism. And we need to work for a world where we have inclusivity, equality, and self-determination for people of all colors and of all regions. I think this is what we are. This is what Jesus meant with the kingdom of God. It's a different reality than what the empire actually all the time is trying through power to subjugate everyone, and in order to do that, they have to demonize them.
Mitri, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of the midst of this genocide and being a witness, a very gracious witness to us. I want to say to the Alliance of Baptists that Mitri is our partner, and the insight into colonization and its impact on the world that Mitri provides comes out of some of what we already started to do. But we got to do more. We got to go deeper. We got to be in richer solidarity with our friends, with our partners. We have to decenter ourselves so that we can really see the scope, the stakes. And so I hope that you wrestle with this, that you grapple, that you contend, and that your move towards action. Mitri, thank you so much. And please join me in thanking Mitri.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being such faithful partners with us for over, I think now 20 years. And I have to confess, talking about racism, I was a bit racist because I thought all Baptists are crazy. Because I thought they are all like the Southern Baptists, until I met the first group of Alliance of Baptists from the DC area, and I learned, you have the most excellent, most progressive, most friendly, most Christian Baptist, and so you changed my heart as well. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. Do we need to give quick announcements? Stephanie, do you want to do that? Or Carol, are you doing it? Who's doing it? Go first. All right, so quick announcements.
Okay. Wow. It's always hard to do this at the end of that. I'm finding all of this to be very, very powerful, very. A lot of you put on the evaluation forms that it's a lot of really good stuff coming at you really fast. I encourage you to take next week to process. Okay, a couple of announcements. Lunch is the same as yesterday. The theological schools are meeting today, so you find that in your program booklet, and it's in Heaton Hall, same as it was before. Now I don't know when this is Sankofa will meet in the library during lunch today. So if you would like to join them, the library is also in Heaton Hall. A reminder from what Isabel said this morning, the churches with Cuba partnerships or folks who are interested in learning more about that will meet in Heaton Hall following worship this afternoon. And Carol Blythe asked me to remind you about what she said, whitehouse.org. Write the letter, it's really easy. Oh, yes, it is gov. I think org is a porn site. Now that I think about that, I think you're right about that. Okay, whitehouse.gov. We are on time again this morning, so workshops will start at 2 o'clock. And again, if you're on the Wi-Fi and you don't necessarily need to be there, we're using the Wi-Fi for folks who are online as well as for interpretation. So please come off of the Wi-Fi if you can. And Stephanie's going to talk about the bookstore.
Okay, so we have copies of The Politics of Persecution and Decolonizing Palestine. This one's being sold through Park Road Books. You'll find them at the end of the Heaton Hall foyer. This one is currently on the registration table. We have about 15 copies of this. I'm not sure how this is being sold yet, but we'll find that out in the next few minutes. We will set up a signing table in this room right here. We'll line up down the aisle. So if you're looking to have your book signed, meet back in here. Give us about 10 minutes to flip this over and figure out how we're doing this too. So thank you so much. Lunch is ready.